The flash of cameras blinded Calvin as he sprinted through the crowded JFK terminal, Theodore's strong hand gripping his like a lifeline. In that single chaotic moment, the video already spreading across every phone screen in New York captured the truth he had hidden for years. The heir to the Harrington empire was running away with his male bodyguard instead of boarding the flight to his engagement party. Calvin's heart hammered against his ribs. At 28, he had everything money could buy. Penthouse overlooking Central Park, board seats at Harrington Real Estate, and a fiancée chosen by his parents to seal a billion-dollar merger. Emily was kind, polished, and completely wrong for him. But admitting that meant admitting everything else. The late-night talks with Theodore over the past year, the way the former Marine's quiet presence made the weight of expectation feel lighter, the stolen glances that turned into something neither of them could name. They had planned nothing. That morning Calvin had simply looked at Theodore in the town car and said, "I can't do this anymore." Theodore hadn't asked questions. He'd grabbed the emergency go bag he always kept ready and driven straight to the airport. Now they were here, two men in love running from a life Calvin had never chosen. His phone vibrated nonstop. Text from his mother, "Where are you? The photographers are waiting." From Emily, "Calvin, please call me." From his father, "Son, whatever this is, we can fix it." Calvin silenced the device and kept moving. Theodore's voice cut through the noise, calm and steady. "Gate 27 is clear. We make it to Chicago, then disappear for a while." They rounded the corner, and the video posted by a teenager with a ring light caught them perfectly. Calvin's hand reaching back for Theodore's, their eyes locked with a tenderness that screamed everything words could not. By the time they reached security, the clip had 500,000 views. Comments flooded in. "Is the Harrington heir gay? That's his bodyguard? Holy plot twist." Calvin felt the ground shift beneath him. Theodore squeezed his hand once before letting go at the scanner. "We're just two guys catching a flight," he murmured. "Keep breathing." But Calvin's mind raced. He remembered the day Theodore started, 6'3" of quiet competence, fresh out of private security after 2 tours in Afghanistan. Calvin's father had hired him because a man in your position needs someone who can handle threats. No one had warned that the real threat would be the way Theodore listened when Calvin talked about feeling trapped. They boarded the plane to Chicago without incident, but Calvin knew the storm was just beginning. As the wheels left the runway, he stared out the window at the shrinking Manhattan skyline and whispered, "I'm sorry I dragged you into this." Theodore's reply was simple. "You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose to run with you." Back in New York, the video hit 10 million views before they even landed. Calvin's mother cried on live television. His father issued a statement calling it a misunderstanding involving security protocols. Emily posted a graceful but devastated photo of her engagement ring with the caption, "Sometimes love isn't enough." The internet took sides instantly. Some called Calvin brave. Others called him selfish. A few accused Theodore of manipulation. In the Chicago hotel room that night, Calvin sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. "My whole life was planned. College, company, marriage, kids. I was supposed to be the perfect son." Theodore knelt in front of him, large hands resting on Calvin's knees. "You're allowed to want something different. You're allowed to want me." The words hung between them, heavy with every unsaid confession from the past year. Calvin reached out, tracing the scar above Theodore's eyebrow from a mission he never talked about. For the first time, he didn't pull away when the touch lingered. Outside, snow began to fall. Inside, two men who had spent months pretending friendship was enough finally let the truth settle between them. But Calvin knew the hardest part wasn't the running. It was what came next. Morning brought the first real blow. Calvin's phone, left on airplane mode overnight, exploded with notifications the second he turned it on. His best friend Marcus had texted a single link, a new video. Someone at the airport had zoomed in on their joined hands and added slow-motion music. The comments were vicious. Rich boy using his bodyguard as a midlife crisis. Poor Emily, she deserved better than a gay cheater. Calvin's stomach twisted. Marcus followed up with a call. "Dude, your dad is losing it. Board members are calling emergency meetings. And Emily's family is threatening to pull out of the merger. What the hell were you thinking?" Calvin couldn't answer. He had been thinking about the night 3 months ago when Theodore had quietly bandaged his knuckles after Calvin punched a wall during a fight with his father. He had been thinking about how safe he felt when Theodore drove him home in silence. No judgment, just presence. Theodore emerged from the bathroom, towel around his waist, hair still damp. "We need a plan that lasts longer than one flight." His voice was steady, but Calvin saw the tension in his shoulders. Theodore had given up everything too: his apartment, his steady paycheck, the respect of the security team he had trained. All for a man who couldn't even say the words out loud until yesterday. They spent the day in the hotel, curtains drawn. Calvin called his sister Olivia, the only person he trusted. She answered on the first ring. "Cal, Mom is hysterical. Dad says if you don't come back and fix this, he's cutting you off. But I saw the video. You looked free. Is this real?" Calvin's voice cracked. "It's real, Liv. His name is Theodore, and I think I've been in love with him for months." The silence on the other end lasted only a second. "Then you better figure out how to keep him. Because the family won't make this easy." That afternoon, a misunderstanding nearly tore them apart. A tabloid published a blurry photo from 6 weeks earlier, Calvin and Theodore laughing outside a coffee shop. The headline screamed, "Bodyguard seduction, how the Harrington heir was groomed." Theodore read it and went quiet. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I crossed a line." Calvin stood up so fast the chair fell over. "Don't you dare. You never once pushed. I was the one who kept finding excuses to keep you close." The argument escalated. Theodore accused Calvin of treating him like a fantasy escape. Calvin accused Theodore of thinking he was just another rich kid's experiment. They shouted until the words ran out, then stood inches apart, breathing hard. Theodore spoke first. "I'm here because I love you, Calvin. Not your money, not your name. You. But I won't be the reason you lose everything if you're not sure." Calvin reached for him then, pulling him into a hug that said everything apologies couldn't. "I'm sure. I've never been more sure." That night they talked until dawn. About the nights Theodore had stayed awake outside Calvin's door because he couldn't sleep knowing Calvin was unhappy. About the letters Calvin had written and burned because he was terrified of what they meant. The misunderstanding cleared like storm clouds, leaving something stronger in its place. But the world outside wasn't done. At 3 a.m., Calvin's father left a voicemail. "Come home, son. We'll spin this. Therapy, a quiet breakup, whatever it takes. Don't throw away your future for a bodyguard." The words stung because part of Calvin still heard them as love. Theodore heard them too and simply said, "Your choice. I'll respect whatever you decide." Calvin looked at the man who had risked his entire life without hesitation and made his decision. "We're not going back. Not yet." The turning point arrived in the form of a plane ticket and a betrayal. 3 days into hiding, Calvin received an email from the family lawyer, a one-way first-class ticket back to New York and a contract offering Theodore a generous severance if he disappeared quietly. Attached was a video, security footage from the Harrington building showing Theodore accepting an envelope from Calvin's father months earlier. The timestamp was the day after Calvin had first confessed his feelings to Theodore in a drunken late-night conversation. Calvin's hands shook as he confronted Theodore in their small Chicago apartment. "You took money to stay away from me?" Theodore's face went pale. "It wasn't like that. Your father offered it as a bonus for extra protection. I never cashed it. I told him to shove it the same day. But the damage was done." Calvin felt the old fear return, the suspicion that everyone in his life had an agenda. He stormed out into the freezing Chicago wind, walking until his fingers went numb. Theodore found him hours later on a bench by the lake, coat dusted with snow. He didn't speak at first, just sat beside him. "I kept the envelope because I was scared too. Scared that if I refused outright, he'd fire me and you'd never know how I felt. I was wrong. I should have told you immediately." Calvin stared at the gray water. "Every person in my life has tried to control me. I thought you were different." Theodore pulled out his phone and showed the transfer history, $0 moved. "I never took a cent. But I understand if you can't trust me now." The honesty cracked something open in Calvin. He realized the real betrayal wasn't the envelope. It was his own doubt. He turned to Theodore, eyes wet. "I'm sorry. I'm so used to being lied to that I assumed the worst." They walked back to the apartment in silence, hands brushing. That night, Theodore told his own story, growing up in a small Ohio town where being gay meant hiding, enlisting to escape, learning that love was something other people got. "When I met you," he said quietly, "I thought I could just protect you and keep my distance. Then you smiled at me one random Tuesday, and I knew I was gone." The misunderstanding became the moment they truly chose each other. Calvin deleted the lawyer's email. "No more secrets. From now on, we face everything together." But the family wasn't finished. The next morning, Olivia called in tears. "Dad hired a private investigator. They know you're in Chicago. He's coming himself tomorrow. And Calvin, he's bringing Emily. They think if she talks to you, you'll come to your senses." The pressure mounted. Calvin felt the walls closing in again. Theodore simply packed their bags. "We leave tonight. My cousin has a cabin in Wisconsin. No one will find us there." As they drove north through the snow, Calvin watched Theodore's profile in the dashboard light. For the first time, he understood the depth of the sacrifice. Theodore had left his entire support network, his savings, his reputation, all for a man still learning how to love openly. Calvin reached over and rested his hand on Theodore's thigh. "Thank you for choosing me even when I made it impossible." Theodore's smile was small but real. "I'd choose you every time." The cabin sat deep in the Wisconsin woods, snow blanketing the roof like a promise of isolation. For 2 weeks they lived simply, chopping wood, cooking basic meals, talking until their voices gave out. Calvin learned the small things. Theodore hummed old country songs when he was nervous, preferred his coffee black, and carried a worn photo of his mother who had died when he was 20. Theodore learned that Calvin secretly loved bad romantic comedies and had nightmares about disappointing his father. One night the power went out. They sat by the fireplace wrapped in one blanket, flames dancing across their faces. Calvin spoke the words he had practiced in his head for months. "I'm gay, and I love you, Theodore. Not as an escape, not as a rebellion, as the person I want to build a life with." Theodore's eyes shone in the firelight. "I've loved you since the night you told me you felt invisible in your own family. I just never thought I'd get to keep you." They kissed then, slow, careful, full of every fear and hope they had carried. It wasn't dramatic. It was real. But peace never lasted. A local news station picked up the story. "Harrington heir still missing. Bodyguard suspected of kidnapping." The lie spread. Calvin's father appeared on television offering a reward for information. Comments online turned ugly again. "The bodyguard is clearly after the money." Theodore read them and went quiet for an entire day. Calvin found him splitting logs with unnecessary force. "You're not a kidnapper. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." Theodore wiped sweat from his brow. "Doesn't matter what I am if the world decides I'm the villain." That conversation led to their first real sacrifice. Theodore suggested he turn himself in, claim he had coerced Calvin, take the blame so Calvin could return to his life with minimal damage. Calvin refused so violently he knocked over a chair. "If you walk away to protect me, I will never forgive you. We either do this together or not at all." Theodore pulled him close, voice rough. "I would rather lose everything than lose you." The decision crystallized something in Calvin. He opened his laptop and recorded a video. No script, just truth. "My name is Calvin Harrington. I'm gay. I fell in love with my bodyguard Theodore because he saw me when no one else did. I'm not kidnapped. I'm exactly where I want to be. To my family, I love you, but I can't live the life you planned for me anymore. To everyone watching, this is my truth. I hope one day you understand." He posted it on every platform he had. The video went viral within hours. Support poured in from strangers. Some family members privately messaged their quiet acceptance. But Calvin's father called immediately. "You just destroyed the company's reputation. Come home and we'll talk damage control." Calvin looked at Theodore across the room and answered, "No, Dad. I'm finally starting to build my own life." He hung up feeling lighter than he had in years. Winter turned to early spring. They moved again, this time to a small apartment in Minneapolis under new names. Calvin found work at a community center teaching financial literacy to underprivileged kids, something his father would have scoffed at. Theodore took a job training security teams at a local firm. Their days were ordinary and perfect, yet the past refused to stay buried. Emily reached out through Olivia. She wanted to meet. Calvin agreed, meeting her alone at a quiet cafe. She looked thinner, eyes red from crying. I always knew something was missing, she said softly. I just didn't know it was because your heart belonged to someone else. There was no anger, only sadness. She slid the engagement ring across the table. I hope he makes you happy, Calvin. You deserve that. The meeting ended in a hug that felt like closure. Theodore waited outside, anxious. When Calvin told him what happened, Theodore exhaled like he had been holding his breath for months. I was terrified she'd convince you to go back. Calvin cupped his face. No one could ever convince me to leave you. The real test came when Calvin's father showed up unannounced at their apartment. The older man stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his coat, looking older than Calvin remembered. I came to bring you home. His eyes flicked to Theodore, standing protectively behind Calvin. Both of you, if that's what it takes. The board is threatening a vote. The merger is collapsing. Your mother hasn't slept in weeks. Calvin invited him inside. They sat at the small kitchen table like strangers. His father spoke of legacy, of bloodline, of the empire built over 3 generations. Then he surprised them. I watched your video 100 times. At first I was furious. Then I saw the way you looked at him. He glanced at Theodore. The same way I looked at your mother when we were young and broke, and everyone said we'd fail. I was wrong to try to choose for you. The confession cracked the last wall. Calvin's father admitted the pressure came from his own father, a cycle he had repeated without thinking. He offered no ultimatums, only an olive branch, a trust fund for Calvin to use however he wanted, no strings, and a job offer for Theodore if he ever chose to return. I'm not asking you to come back to the company. I'm asking you to come back to the family. When you're ready. That night after his father left, Calvin and Theodore sat on the fire escape watching city lights. He's trying, Calvin said. Theodore nodded. And you're not the same man who ran through that airport. You're stronger. Summer arrived with new beginnings. Calvin and Theodore flew back to New York, not to the penthouse, but to a modest brownstone in Brooklyn they bought together. Calvin's mother visited first, bringing homemade lasagna and tears. She hugged Theodore awkwardly but sincerely. Thank you for loving my son when I didn't know how to let him be himself. Olivia came next, dragging her husband and kids, turning the house into chaotic laughter. Even Calvin's father attended the small housewarming, shaking Theodore's hand with genuine respect. The viral airport video that had started it all became a symbol. Documentaries requested interviews. Calvin declined most but agreed to one, on the condition Theodore sat beside him. They spoke honestly about fear, about love, about the courage it took to choose each other. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of young men wrote letters saying the story gave them hope. One quiet evening on their rooftop, Calvin turned to Theodore. Remember the day we ran? Theodore smiled, pulling him closer. Best decision I ever made. Below them the city hummed, indifferent to their happiness. But inside their home, 2 men had built something unbreakable. Calvin had lost an empire but gained a life. Theodore had given up safety but found home. Together they proved that love, when chosen freely, could rewrite every expectation. Was running away from everything you were raised to want the only way for Calvin to become the man he was meant to be? Or could he have found the same happiness without breaking his family's heart?